Hello guys, welcome back to R6 Esports Insider. And today's video will be about the roster changes in the 3 big regions and some of the bigger teams in the other leagues, as well as an overview for this stage's leagues. Sorry for the delay, I was waiting for all the roster changes to be confirmed, and I wanted to put out false information for y'all. Before I start the video, I wanted to tell y'all I got a Twitter page with the same name. Over there I give updates for all the league games and predictions, so if you're interested, give me a follow. The link is down in the description. Now onto the video. The first region I want to go into is North America. I think this stage's NAL could be a toss-up with some teams, and they're good and questionable roster moves, so I feel like this is just going to be a very exciting stage for NA. The first team I want to talk about is Dark Zero. They're the only team in NA to not make a move since they made their moves before SI. Technically, they re-signed the entire team through 2025, but they didn't make any changes. But those moves before SI consisted of Bolo and Nafe. I believe these two additions could propel this team to #1 in NA, and a possible top 4 finish in Manchester. The second team I want to talk about is Space Station. This team kept improving after each event, but they still made a surprising move in the dropping of Hot and Cold. But I personally love the pickup of Iconic. And with that pickup, the 3 strongest players from the former Astralis team are back together, so I think this team is so ready for a deep run of the tournament this year. The next team I want to talk about is Oxygen. This team had a little bit of a shakeup with the retirements of Foxe, who's been with the team since they came into Siege Esports, and Fish. But they picked up Gomez and Diaz from M80, and I personally think this move was great for OXG, as they now have 2 really good, consistent players to pair with Newers, Dream, and Yaga. I think this team is ready for a return to LAN this year. The next team I want to talk about is Wildcard Gaming. I personally loved the last stage's Wildcard team, which consisted of Merc, Spirits, Adam, Surf, and Packer. I don't know what is with orgs dropping young rosters with huge potential after only having 1 stage, but Wildcard did that this offseason and picked up the former Mirage team, which consisted of Rampy, Kansan, Vertical, Bosco, and Spiker. I don't think this team is horrible by no means, and I think they could sneak into the major. I just would have liked to see the former team some more. The next team I'm going to talk about had an almost complete roster change, and that is M80. M80 had such a disappointing year last year and failed a lot of expectations. So changes were expected, and they decided to do the super team route. The new squad consists of Spoit, Kino, Citizen from Sonics, Noodle from Geek, and the legend Cameraman. I think on paper this team could be really good or a dumpster fire, so we'll have to see. The next team in NA that made changes is Beast Coast. They did a complete roster change with the droppings of Mr. B, Hat, Doc, Reverse, and Spiff, and with the addition of Gavini, Spirits, Gunner, Hot and Cold, and Diffuser. I personally love this roster. I feel like all of these players have been tossed aside like scraps, but they are actually really good players. So they will definitely try and get their revenge on their former teams next stage. And I feel like they can sneak into the major with some other teams trying to figure it out. The next team is a new org to NA, and that is Los, but with a brand new team, so it's not the same team that was runner-up in Atlanta. And instead, it's a team that consists of Sexy Cake, Bursa, Legacy, Farius, and Rise. I have no idea how this team will do in NA, and I expect them to be at the bottom, but you never know. The next team I'm going to talk about is one I feel like could make some noise, but I just don't know because there's so many other good teams inside the region, and that is Luminosity. This team made 3 changes with the droppings of Snake, Asian, and Twitz, and the pickups of Hat, Wi-Fi, and Kixro. I personally love the Hat pickup. He's been a solid player for a while, but I'm not sure about the other 2, so we'll just have to see. Honestly, screw Mirage. I don't understand how this org is still in Pro League. They don't pay their players, and Ubisoft doesn't even care. They should have lost their spot a long time ago. They couldn't even pick up their own roster. They had to get a team on a loan from SBL that consists of Asian, Spiff, Poison, Rice, and Nick. I mean, this team is very young, so probably won't do much, but you never know. But honestly, screw Mirage. The next region I'm going to dive into is Europe. EU did lose 3 orgs from the previous stage, and those orgs consist of Eminem Gaming, Heroic, and Rogue. I think this stage has no real clear favorite, with every team having a chance to make the major this stage. The first team I want to talk about made no roster moves, and that is G2. This team finished top 4 at SI, and if I had to pick a favorite, they would be mine to win EUL. The second team I want to talk about from EUL is Virtus Pro. This team won both stages last year and made top 3 at SI, and I think them and G2 are definitely going to be the top 2 teams inside EUL and should be at the major in Manchester. The next team I'm going to talk about made 2 great roster moves, and that is BDS. The roster changes they made were the droppings of Elims and Ranchero, who had been with the team for a very long time, but they needed to go. to pick up two former M&M players in Solotov and Uzis. My goodness, this team looks so good on paper, and they proved it at the Malta Cyber Series last week, and honestly, if this team gels right, they could beat the current world champs in Furia, but we'll have to see. Next team I'm going to talk about is Wolves, and man, another disappointing year for them. But they are confident in this team as they decided to not make any changes to the roster, which is smart because I feel like in Siege Esports, no one gives time to rosters to grow and learn. So I think we might see this team learn from their mistakes and make another run in Manchester. One of the new orgs to join EUL is one of the biggest orgs in all of esports, and that is Fnatic. And this org picked up the former Rogue team with a couple of tweaks, with the droppings of Cryan and Hasty, and the pickups of Tyrant from M&M and Jegs from Wild. I feel like this roster could surprise some people with these two pickups with Leon Gids, Deepak, and Jigsaw as the other players on the roster. This team on paper could be really good with some chemistry, but again, we just have to see. The other new org to join EU is actually a returning org, and that is INTZ. They used to be one of the best teams in EU in the early days of Pro League, but this time they picked up a French team instead of a Finnish team. The roster they picked up was the former Team Valor team, which was a Tier 2 team, but this team isn't no pushover, with them winning the R6 South Breach tournament, which had Tier 1 teams in it. The team does consist of Frenchie, Jax, Nako, Rawkos, and Skies. I think this team might not have instant success, but I think with some time and patience, they can become a top EU team. Wild is the next team that made changes. This team had great starts at the beginning of both stages last year, but fell short to reach any major event. And with the ban of Aces, Jegs leaving to Fnatic, and the dropping of Hungry, this team is looking to Kanto, Nello, and Lalo to fill those voids. I think this team could be good, but I think they might find themselves at the bottom of EUL this stage. Team Secret made two changes to their roster, with the droppings of Falls and Upor, and the additions of Jume and Adrian, to go alongside Miracle, Savage, and Grubby. I think these moves are really weird for this team, as it doesn't make them worse, but it also doesn't make them better either. So I see them in between the middle and the bottom of EUL. The last team I'm going to talk about in EUL is Into the Breach. This team way overperformed expectations last stage, with them being one game away from making it to the major, so I expected them to keep the same team, but they decided to move on from Kanto and Junka, and to replace those guys were Creeds and Oscar. I don't really understand these moves, as I don't think these moves make them better, and actually, I think they make them worse, and I expect them to be at the bottom of EUL. The last region I'm going to look at is Brazil. The region is still the best region in the world with the two best teams in Siege right now. The addition of two new orgs is interesting, and I still think we could have a crazy stage with some underrated teams sneaking into the major. But Furia is back in the scene, and they made a huge splash with the additions of the recent SI champs and two-time major champs, and the former W7M roster that consists of Kizi, JV92, Herds, Philippox, and Nade. This team is easily the best team in the world right now, and I don't see anyone topping them anytime soon. FaZe alongside Furia and NIP are the only teams to not make any changes, as they still have Handy, Cyber, Vidaking, KDS, and Souls. This team is still the number 2 team in the world right now, and will definitely be in the major in Manchester. Liquid had an up and down year last year, with a second place finish in Copenhagen to not making it to Atlanta, to a disappointing finish at SI. This result led to the dropping of Volps to the addition of Maya. I personally love this move from moving from a solo ratty player to a true entry fragger. I think this move will put them right where we expect Liquid to be at next stage. The last team to not make any changes for this stage is NIP. I think this team needed to make some changes to keep up with the rest of the Brazilian League, but they are sticking with the roster of Muzi, Cons, Psycho, Pino, and Wizard. W7M is still staying in the Siege Esports scene, even though they didn't have enough money to re-sign the world champs. But W7M is bringing in reinforcements to make their new team in Siege, with the additions of Volps, Dots, Dash, Dodes, and the man, the myth, the legend, and Lobin. I'm really excited to see this team in action, as I think this team can make some noise with these players, and can be a sneaky team in the next stage. The next team in Brazil made an almost rehaul of the roster, and that is MIBR. They decided to drop Reduc, Nigel, Perez, and Fantasy, and to add Bullet 1, Simper, Gomez, and Yetz, and to keep Rare. I think this team is still a middle of the pack team, as they didn't get better or worse with these moves, so another disappointing year for MIBR is expected. Heatstars is pretty much sticking with their young team experiment, with only one roster move with the droppings of Gomez and the addition of Stimp. So the roster looks like Daffodil, Hates, Hornetow, Linda, and Stimp. I think this team did pretty well last stage, and I think they can improve this stage and sneak into the major. E1 had a surprising run in last stage's Brazilian League, but fell short of a major spot. So they are looking at a full roster change to maybe fix that issue. So instead of Astro, Sexy Cake, Dodes, Lukid, and Raps, the roster looks younger with the additions of Arthur, Flashtree, STK, Pettis, and Inties. This team is young, and they might not have instant success, so I hope E1 gives more patience for this roster than their last. Black Dragons has decided to go younger with their new roster moves. They decided to drop Live, Patoxy, and Stimp to go with 3 players with no experience in Tier 1 in Guto, Nuxka, and Florio to pair with Ask and Laura. I think this roster has potential, but I'm really not sure. The other new org to join Brazil is Fluxo, and their roster is basically E1 but with 2 changes with their roster. The roster is going to look like Astro, Lukid, Raps, Hash, and Mitrix. I like this team, but I don't know how well this team will do with the heavy stacked Brazilian league, but we'll have to wait and see. The next couple of teams I'm going to talk about aren't going to be from a certain region, but big teams from other regions. The first team from the other regions didn't make a move, but they re-signed their players, and that is Team Bliss from Australia. And this team was exciting to watch grow throughout last year, and I'm glad an org is finally trusting the process when it comes to young and inexperienced teams. So really excited to watch Brendo, Fishokai, Sejion, Oda, and Wettables next stage, and hopefully in Manchester. Geekade from the Mania region was a surprising team in Atlanta with a top 8 finish there. So they had expectations going into SI, but they fell short, and so that caused a roster shakeup with the droppings of Noodle and Hasham, with the additions of Blast and Falcon. So now the roster is Trix, Key, Seriously, Blaz, and Falcon. I think this move is interesting, especially the Blaz move, because I've always felt like he's been a good player, just hasn't gotten the right situation. So maybe Geekade could be the situation he needs. Team Falcons in the Mena League finally is stopping the 6-man team experiment with the droppings of Jokers 619 and Valentino, and the pickup of just Hasham. So now the team looks like JLad, O-Kills, P9, Q6Z, and Hasham. I think this team showed promise in Copenhagen and SI, so interested to see if they can continue to grow and make it to the major. Elevate in the Asian League made a little bit of a shakeup after a bit of an up and down year and missing SI, with the droppings of Healthcare, OG, Barcode OP, and Tolji, which these guys were more on the veteran side of the spectrum, and instead they went young, with 3 young players and 2 which were from the infamous Jihu team that beat G2 in the South Breach tournament a couple of months ago. The players they picked up were Misi and Shed, which were from the Jihu team, and Naquil, to pair with Ape and Speakeasy. The Asian region only getting 1 spot should be interesting with Bleed Fury and now a fresh new look, Elevate. Kag Osoka from the Japanese region dropped Arkoli and moved Suzu to a coaching position, and picked up Shurip and Sireniko. I think Kag should be right there with Scars, who dominated the Japanese region last year, but you never know with Cyclops. The next team is from the South Korea League, and that is D+. They had a very disappointing SI and just a disappointing year in general, so no surprise they would make changes. Those changes consisted of Yas retiring and Soldier going back to Talent Esports after the loan expired. So they had to pick up 2 new players, which were Yunsung and Sayora, to pair with Woogieman, Demali, and Coded. I don't know if this team is going to be any good, so we'll just have to see. The last team I'm going to talk about is another Korean team, and that is Talent Esports. As now the org is paired with PSG Esports, and so now they're called PSG Talon. And with that announcement, they picked up 2 of the most decorated players ever in Siege, and Pingu for content creation and Fabian for a head coaching position. So it should be interesting to see if Fabian can make a Uyghur region team into a top competitor. That's not all the roster moves that happened, just the main ones from the big regions. Sorry I couldn't get them all, but thank you for watching the video, and if you want more R6 Esports content, subscribe to the channel and follow my Twitter, which is where I have all the predictions for all the regions. So, thank you for watching, and God bless.